my brother called me on a Thursday morning to tell me that my mother had signed everything over to him the day before. The house on Willowbrook Drive, the savings accounts she had been building for 31 years, the investment account she had started with $200 and never touched, everything, gone, in one Wednesday afternoon while I was 8 hours away in Charlotte, living my life, trusting that things were fine. He said, "Mama wanted it this way, Simone. I need you to know that." And then he hung up. I sat in that grocery store parking lot for 45 minutes without moving, engine running, groceries getting warm in the trunk, just sitting there with my phone in my lap, thinking about the last time I had held my mother's hands, how thin they had gotten, how the skin had gone papery and dry, how the knuckles had swollen in the way that old hands do, slowly and without asking permission. I thought about her voice on our last Sunday call, how she had laughed at something I said, how she had asked about my friend Tanya's new baby. And I thought about my brother's voice on the phone just now, so certain, so settled, like the announcement of something that had already been decided and all that remained was informing the other party. What Darius did not know, what he had no way of knowing because I had told absolutely no one, was that 3 weeks before that phone call, I had driven down to Macon on a Tuesday afternoon when he was at work. Just Mama and me, a quiet visit, the kind that doesn't get announced. And on that Tuesday afternoon, my mother had signed something too, something Darius knew nothing about, something that was already sitting in a file at the county courthouse, waiting. My name is Simone Grace Whitfield, 43 years old, hospital administrator, Charlotte, North Carolina, oldest child of Patricia and Harold Whitfield of Macon, Georgia. My father passed when I was 27. My mother spent the 16 years after that in the house they had built together, a 4-bedroom house on Willowbrook Drive with a covered porch and a garden she tended every spring, and front steps she sat on every summer evening until the mosquitoes drove her inside. I want to tell you about my mother before I tell you anything else, because Patricia Whitfield deserves to be seen as a full person, not just a piece of property that her children argued over in a courthouse, and because nothing that happened makes sense without understanding who she was. Mama gave quietly and completely. She was not loud about her love. She showed it in the particular way she did things, the way she pressed your good blouse before you even asked, the way she remembered what you liked and had it ready when you came home, the way she could sit with you through something hard without filling the silence with words that would have been smaller than what the moment needed. She had worked for 31 years as a school secretary at Macon Elementary. She kept every card her children ever gave her in a shoebox under her bed, birthdays, Christmases, the ones you wrote in crayon when you were 7. She had never learned to make sweet potato pie from a recipe because the recipe was in her hands, had been in her hands since her own grandmother put it there. She never said out loud that Darius was her favorite. She would have been deeply, genuinely hurt at the suggestion, but Darius had always been the child who needed more reassurance, more patience, more of the particular kind of love that keeps coming back no matter how many times it gets taken for granted. And Mama gave it. She gave it without calculation, without resentment, because it was simply who she was. And I had watched her give it for 43 years, and loved her for it, even in the moments when it left less for me. I had spent my whole life being the daughter who was fine, the old one who moved away and built something and called every Sunday and visited when I could, and never asked for more than what was given, because asking felt like taking from a pile that someone else needed more urgently. Nobody tells you what it costs to always be the one who is fine. Nobody tells you that one day someone will look at how little you have asked for and decide that this means you don't need anything at all. Darius stayed in Macon. He lived 20 minutes from Mama's house and saw her regularly, sometimes twice a week, sometimes more. He ate her food and watched her television and let her do his laundry on occasion because she liked to feel useful. And I had told myself for years that his proximity was a kind of care, that between the two of us, Mama was covered, that I contributed in different ways. What I had not fully reckoned with was the difference between being close to someone and actually caring for them in the ways that matter. Darius was close. The doctor's appointments were managed by her neighbor, Miss Carroll, who had known Mama for 22 years and treated looking after her as simply what a neighbor did. The medication schedule was something Miss Carroll had helped set up after Mama missed her blood pressure pills 3 times in 1 month. The conversations about what Mama wanted for her future, for her care, for what came after, had never happened, because Darius was uncomfortable with those conversations, and Mama, who had spent her whole life avoiding burdening people, did not push. I had tried to start those conversations, on phone calls, during visits. Darius always found a way to redirect. "She's fine, Simone. She has years yet. You're being morbid." He was not being dishonest exactly, he was being afraid. He had looked at the possibility of losing her and decided not to look at it, which meant also not looking at what she would need and what she wanted and what was fair. I have spent a long time trying to hold on to that distinction, afraid, not malicious, because it is the only version of events that allows me to still call him my brother. Mama's decline began the year after her 74th birthday and moved the way those things moved, slowly at first, then less slowly. Forgetting appointments, medication confusion. One morning she called me by my Aunt Loretta's name and then laughed about it and then didn't remember she had done it 15 minutes later. She fell twice in 6 months, once in the kitchen, once coming down the porch steps. Her doctor started using words like cognitive decline and supervised care and long-term planning. Darius and I had the worst conversation of our adult lives that fall about what to do. He wanted to handle it himself. He wanted to be her primary caretaker and the one in charge of her affairs. He wanted, though he didn't say this clearly, maybe didn't even fully know he wanted it, to be the one who got to make the decisions. I said we needed an elder law attorney. I said we needed to have a formal, documented conversation about Mama's wishes. I said we needed her doctor involved in any significant decisions about her care or her living situation. He said I was overcomplicating things. He said Mama trusted him. He said I moved to Charlotte and he stayed, and that had to count for something. I said, staying near someone and taking care of them aren't the same thing, Darius. He did not speak to me for 3 weeks after that conversation. I drove down to Macon in February, 6 weeks before the phone call. I had been carrying a specific worry about Mama for months, not something I could point to exactly, just a background hum, an instinct, the kind of knowing that lives in the body before the mind has words for it. I told Darius I was coming, but I didn't tell him why, and I scheduled it for a Tuesday when I knew he would be at work, Mama and me alone, an afternoon. She was having a good day, one of her best in months, she told me. Her good days and bad days had been cycling in a way that was hard to predict. We sat on the front porch in the February sun, cold but the kind of bright that feels like a conversation, and we drank sweet tea and talked about things we hadn't talked about in years. Her childhood in rural Georgia, growing up the third of 6 children in a house that had more love than space, her own mother's hands. The early years of her marriage to my father before his first business failed and they had to start over from almost nothing, and how they had started over together without letting it take anything from them that mattered. She talked about Daddy the way she always talked about him on good days, not with the grief of it, though the grief was always there underneath, with the warmth of a woman who loved someone completely and never stopped. And then she set down her glass of tea and she looked at me with the look I recognized, the one she had when she had been carrying something for a while and decided it was time to set it down. She said, "I need to talk to you about something, baby." She told me that Darius had been bringing someone to the house, a man with papers. He had come twice in the past 2 months. She had signed things, she said, but she wasn't entirely certain what they were. He had explained, but she hadn't followed all of it, and she hadn't wanted to ask him to slow down because she didn't want to seem confused in front of people. She said, "You know how I am about seeming confused." I kept my voice completely steady. I took her hand and I said, "Mama, I need you to come somewhere with me this afternoon, just for a couple of hours." I had done my research before making that trip. I had identified an elder law attorney in Macon, a woman named Nadine Clark, who had been practicing for 28 years and who had the kind of reputation that gets built one family at a time, carefully, without shortcuts. I had called her office the week before and explained enough of the situation for her to understand what we might be walking into. She had said to come in on a Tuesday afternoon if we could. Mama put on her good wool coat and her pearl earrings. She always wore her pearl earrings when she was going somewhere that mattered, and we drove to Nadine's office on the other side of Macon. And for 2 hours, with a clarity that moved me and I think surprised Mama a little herself, she sat across from Nadine Clark and told her exactly what she wanted. Not what Darius had suggested, not what the man with the papers had explained, what she actually wanted, in her own words, in her own order, without anyone in the room who had something to gain by nudging her in any direction. She wanted the house to go to both her children equally. She wanted her savings divided equally. She wanted her grandmother's china, the set she had wrapped carefully in dish towels and kept in the hall closet for 40 years, to come to me. She wanted her father's woodworking tools to go to Darius, because Darius had always admired them and had her father's hands, and she had thought about this many times, and it felt right. She wanted to stay at home for as long as it was safe, and then to be in a good facility when it was no longer safe, and she wanted both of her children involved in making that decision together, not one of them making it alone. Nadine prepared the documents carefully over that afternoon and the following morning. She explained every page before Mama signed anything. 2 witnesses were present, both members of Nadine's staff. Everything was dated and timed and filed. Mama signed her name on each page the way she had always signed her name, Patricia Ann Whitfield, each letter formed deliberately and without rushing, like her name was something worth taking your time with. Nadine filed everything at the DeKalb County Courthouse that week. I received certified copies. I put them in a folder in my laptop bag, and I drove Mama home and we had dinner together. She made fried chicken and collard greens because she said she felt like cooking, and afterward she fell asleep in her armchair watching her program the way she always did, her chin dropping, her breathing going slow and even. I sat with her for a while before I left. I watched her sleep in that chair she had sat in for 20 years, surrounded by the things she had kept, photographs and small figurines, and the hand-stitched pillow her mother had made. I thought about how small she looked and how much of the world she had held up anyway, quietly, without ever asking for acknowledgement. Quietly, I drove back to Charlotte the next morning. I told no one what we had done. 6 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in March, my brother's name appeared on my phone screen. What Darius had done, I pieced this together over the following weeks, through Nadine and through Mrs. Carroll, who had been next door that Wednesday, and whose account was clear and consistent, was bring the notary back to the house on a day when Mama was not well. Mrs. Carroll said she had gone over that morning to check on her, and Mama had not recognized her at first, had called her by another name, had seemed confused about what day it was. By early afternoon, Darius was there with the man and the papers. I do not believe he looked at his mother that day and thought, "I am going to take advantage of her." I believe he had told himself a story for so long about what he had earned by staying, about what I had forfeited by leaving, about what proximity meant and what it entitled him to, that by the time he sat across the table from her with those documents, the story felt like the truth. What he did not know was that 6 weeks earlier, on a good Tuesday afternoon with sweet tea and pearl earrings and 2 witnesses and a 28-year attorney, his mother had made her wishes clear in a legal document that had been filed at the county courthouse, a document that reflected what Mama had chosen deliberately with full understanding on one of her best days, a document that could not be superseded by something signed on one of her worst. Nadine had anticipated this possibility. She had seen it before, she told me later, the race to document, the window of time between a parent's decline and the moment someone decides to act. She had structured everything she prepared to account for it. Mama's medical records, establishing the pattern of good days and bad days, the neighbor's account of Mama's state that Wednesday, the timeline that showed our documents signed 6 weeks earlier, properly witnessed and filed, versus documents signed under circumstances that were, at minimum, significantly more difficult to defend. I called Nadine from the parking lot. She answered on the first ring. I told her what Darius had said. There was a brief silence, the specific quality of silence from a woman who has prepared for a moment and now is watching it arrive. She said, "We're ready, Simone. Come down when you can." The legal process took 4 months. I will not pretend otherwise. It was not clean or simple or without cost. There is a particular kind of grief in fighting your brother in a legal proceeding, in sitting at a conference table across from someone who grew up in the same house, who was held by the same mother, who knows the same stories you know, and watching attorneys speak in careful, measured language about cognitive capacity and documentation and dates, while somewhere at the center of all of it is your mother, who never wanted any of this, who had spent her whole life trying to keep peace between the two of you. Darius didn't speak to me for the first 2 months. When he finally did, it was through his attorney. Later, when it became clear which way things were going, he called me directly. He said he had only been trying to protect her. He said he hadn't trusted me to be present when it mattered. He said he had stayed and I hadn't, and that had to count for something. I said, "Staying near someone and taking care of them aren't the same thing, Darius." The same words, a third time, still true. The court ruled in accordance with the trust documents Nadine had prepared, the house divided as Mama had wanted, the accounts divided equally. The china would come to me, the tools to Darius. Mama passed 8 months after that Thursday phone call. She was at home, in her own bed, which is what she had asked for. We were both there, Darius and me, together in that house on Willowbrook Drive, on the same side of something for a first time in a long time. Whatever was still unresolved between us, and there was still plenty that was unresolved, we both loved her. We were both in that room when she needed us to be. That is the only thing that mattered when it was happening. I have the certified copies of those documents in a folder in my desk. I look at them sometimes, at Mama's signature on each page, Patricia Ann Whitfield, every letter clear and deliberate, and I think about that Tuesday afternoon in February, the pearl earrings, the sweet tea, the February sun on the porch before we drove across town to Nadine's office. She had been protecting me for years in ways I had not always recognized. The Sunday phone calls without fail, the grandmother's china she had always known would come to me, the shoebox of cards she had kept since I was a child, the way she always asked about my work and my friends and my life, as if those things mattered as much as Darius's proximity, as much as anything. That Tuesday in February was the last way she found to protect me, the most permanent one. She had a good day, and she used it. I want to say something to anyone listening who is the one in their family who is fine, who has spent years needing less, asking less, trusting that fairness would arrange itself eventually without anyone having to push for it. Have the hard conversations while there is still time to have them. Sit with the people you love on their good days and ask them what they want, and write it down and make it legal and file it somewhere that matters. Not because you don't trust anyone, because love alone, genuine, real love, unquestioned, sometimes is not enough to protect what matters when the moment comes. Because the people who love you most may not have the capacity to fight for you when it counts. You have to do some of that work yourself in advance, before you need it. Patricia Whitfield wanted both her children to be equal. She found a way to make sure that happened on a good Tuesday afternoon, when she still had the clarity to do it. She signed her name and trusted that it would be enough. It was enough. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Zuri Chronicles, because every week we come back here and we tell another story, another truth, another family trying to find its way through something that love alone couldn't fix. My name is Zuri, and I'll see you next time.